Hi everyone, recapping Sunday's Bible talk in Luke chapter 22, verses 1 to 23, which I called the plan. At the beginning, we see Judas betraying Jesus because he's influenced by Satan. We see Jesus beginning a new covenant in his blood with his followers. And we see Jesus at the end saying, I know who's going to betray me. Really interesting passage to look at. Now, it begins by the religious leaders of their day realizing they can't trap Jesus because the crowds are way too excited to have him around. They're too thrilled to bits to know Jesus. And so their plan isn't working. And when their plans come to an end, Satan steps in. The first time we've seen Satan active in Luke's gospel since chapter 4 with Jesus' temptation. Active now to betray Jesus by influencing or entering into, it says, Judas. Super interesting. What does it mean that Satan entered Judas? Don't think possessed. That's not really the right idea that it's getting across. We read 6 times, in fact, after Satan entered Judas, 6 times Judas does normal behaviors, things that are ascribed to him. And moreover, the religious leaders of the day don't see Satan in this. They simply see Judas making some decisions. Really interesting to talk through what that means. But the key idea is that it's consistent with Satan's character to want to stop the plan of God from progressing. He has his own plan. Using Judas, the religious leaders, think maybe Joseph, Genesis 50 verse 20, when he says, what you've meant for evil, brothers, God meant for good. And you could say the same thing here. Satan, Judas, what you've meant for evil, God actually means for good. Because we see Jesus now, from 7 to 23, complete control, not fazed, not put out, not stressed by the situation of betrayal, but actually realizing and telling us this is part of God's plan. God's redemptive plan in Jesus is about the betrayal of him. Interesting how we too betray God. Humanity's story is a betrayal of God. Sin at its high point when Judas betrays Jesus. Jesus inaugurates a new covenant as well. Covenant has the idea of an agreement between God and humanity. We see them with marriage covenants or peace treaties. The idea of an agreement between two parties to uphold each other's side. Jesus says, a new covenant's coming in my body and blood because you guys can't uphold your end of the bargain. I'm going to have to do it for you. And it's wonderfully good news. As Jesus moves on, the betrayal comes back and he says, I know one of you is going to betray me. Their hand is at the table. And the rest of the disciples get thrown off in a chaotic whirlwind of who is it? Who is it? You know, the interesting thought is that this whole plan of God centers on Jesus dying, on Jesus being betrayed, on the new covenant in his body and blood. So kick around in your group tonight, when you meet, whenever that would be, in fact, what does it mean that God actually has a plan? It centers on Jesus and this new covenant. It fits inside a betrayal, all so that we can be forgiven, be made right with God, all by his grace. And they're the 2 points that we ended on. God's grace is seen in this plan. God's grace comes to us in the new covenant through Jesus' blood. And Jesus knows, we have a God who knows what's going on. As chaotic as it might be, God's plan is still at work, centering on Jesus, will always be fulfilled in Jesus. He's never caught off guard, and that's the grace of God to us. And so why not consider, think about this week as you pray, maybe confess your own sin when you've betrayed God, when you've betrayed Jesus in the way you live, but the new covenant's full of grace, all because of Jesus' body and blood. So why not come to the God who forgives you, who knows you, whose plan centers on Jesus, because that can be your plan too. You can come and know that God and that new covenant he's made with you in Christ. And then live that way, knowing that he knows in all the chaos and all the uncertainty, nothing throws God off, and you can be known by that God too. As you meet and pray, I do hope you have a great time together as the people of God, celebrating the new life we have in Jesus. And I hope to see you next week as we gather at 10 o'clock at Padair School as the people of God to celebrate who this great covenant-making God is, full of grace and forgiveness. Have a great week.